I am here today with two people, two guests on my little interview here. We've got Jude and we've got Ian. Hello, Jude.
Hello.
And hello to Ian.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
I'm all right. So we're here today because a new book's coming out, Lift from the Darkness. This is Ian and Arthur, who's not here today. It's their story. Jude has crafted this as only Jude can. But let's come first to you, Ian. Just give us a little bit of a view. What do you hope this book to do?
Well, about over 20 years ago, we launched a book called Tough Talk that had my personal testimony in. And so a couple of years ago, Arthur and me got together and we realised we'd been evangelising, been on the road for 30 years. And Arthur was talking about putting a book together about us on the road and all the stuff that we've been through and places we've been to. But the thought process was I wanted it to be more than just like a storybook. It had to have a purpose. The purpose was to encourage Christians to get out and share their faith, really. So as evangelists, I wanted to encourage people through the stories of our experiences to engage and to be bold in their faith.
Just go on to Tough Talk. I know of it. For someone who's not heard about Tough Talk before, what's Tough Talk all about?
Well, Tough Talk, the idea of Tough Talk, and actually you get a good picture of this in the book because we explore the origins of Tough Talk. Tough Talk is a Christian charity. And many, many years ago, I got asked to share my testimony in a church. And the pastor at the time said, why don't you bring some weights in? And because I and some of the other guys that had come to faith had a background in weightlifting and powerlifting, it seemed a strange concept, but we took some weights into the church and shared our stories, had some fun, and some people came to faith that night. And then we got asked to go to a prison and different places. So over the 30 years, Tough Talk has been in ministry. We visited everything from army camps. We've done outreaches on the beaches, in the snow. We've done it in the mountains. It's kind of a crazy thing. We've been in hardcore prisons like Rikers Island prison out in New York and to little primary schools. So we get an incredible opportunity because of our backgrounds in bodybuilding and also some of the bad mistakes we made in life. Just share our faith, how God can transform lives.
So this book then really is trying to capture, I'm guessing, a lot of that, stick it into a book form. So I guess it's many of the stories that you might have used on the road, but it's sticking it in book form. Is that about right?
That's about right. Yeah. I mean, there's something special, I think, when you're actually reading something and you're imagining these stories for yourself. For example, there was a moment we nearly got kidnapped out in Beirut. We were doing a mission out in Beirut and we nearly got kidnapped. So if I say it like that, it sounds quite flippant. But when you read it in the book form, with Jude's help, we was able to capture the moment, I think, and you think, well, wow, if God can use these guys, that's the plan. If God can use these guys, He can use anyone. So if He can use us to get out and share the gospel, we're just normal guys. We've not been to, we're not at a theology college or anything like that, and we've seen many, many people come to faith over the years.
So, I mean, let's bring in Jude. So you're taking these stories, 30 years of Tough Talk, stories of two people. How did you enter this project?
Well, I was really invited by the publisher Authentic Media, who I've written with before. They just contacted me and said, we think this might be your next project. They mentioned Tough Talk. They explained that this was it's actually three guys. You've got Joe in there as well, who's a little bit more recent, who have just got the most extraordinary testimony stories, like Ian said, of having lives completely turned around through faith. But perhaps even more extraordinary, since that moment, they've been out on the road telling people what's happened to them, explaining their faith for 30 years. That is a long time. That's a long time for them to be together and a long time to be telling their story. And there's this immense authenticity and commitment that I could see right from the start, that I knew. So I guess I knew it would be a really good story, but I also knew there was real substance to it. So that's how I got involved, really.
So you've got these two guys who have done, I'll come back to you, Ian, in a second. So you've been doing like bodybuilding and weightlifting. So what's the sporting element of what it is that you did that led to Tough Talk?
Well, for me personally, I was a bodybuilder. So I used to stand on a stage in a little pair of swimming trunks, brother, and put baby oil on my body and show off my physique and eat a lot of eggs. That was my background. Arthur, a bit more respectfully, I suppose, was a powerlifter. So it was all about strength and bench pressing, but similar training, similar kind of backgrounds, and both of us have worked as doormen, bouncers way back, and both of our lives went out of shape through that, through the environment of working on the door and the gyms and getting involved in steroids and sadly getting involved in crime. And I think for both of us, we would have been dead many years ago if it was not for an encounter with Jesus Christ. So I had an incredible supernatural encounter when driving home from work one night, out on bail, covered in some guy's blood, and it just transformed my life. I called out to God to have mercy on me. And that was like 35 years ago now. And then we got asked, as I said earlier, to share our stories. I didn't realize that it was going to be a road of evangelism. I didn't really know what evangelism was back in those days. And slowly, I got more and more passionate about the subject of evangelism and how do you evangelize and how do you break down arguments and how do you share in prisons, or if you're in a police, doing the concert for the police or something, how am I going to step up and share my gospel in front of these guys? So the Lord's used me and used Arthur and Joe to really communicate to just some unbelievable places through the stories and just making it applicable depending on the audience we've got. I've done women's conferences to, hardcore prisons, as I said earlier.
There's quite a lot in there. I was just thinking, Jude, how do you kind of package all of that, which I can understand how easy that is to say, in a sense, standing at a stage. I don't mean easy for the person, but it's easy to sort of translate that across to an audience that are listening. How do you then take those stories and think, well, that's a really good story, this is going to translate? How do you package all of that into black and white text on a book?
Yeah, well, it wasn't totally a bed of roses, was it, Ian? It took quite a lot of work, and as you can tell, Ian's an amazing communicator, and these guys can, they can do a person-to-person or in-person communication off the top of their heads in their sleep, pretty much. But putting it down on paper is different, and I suppose we spent a lot of hours on Zoom, so gathering material, and then in a sense, always the most difficult bit is working out what to include and what to keep out and how to structure it. So we had a lot of conversations about the structure, and I think what it ended up as is a kind of a chronological structure. So you start with how Ian and Arthur met each other, which itself is quite a miraculous story. You look at their past lives and their conversion to Christianity, meeting Jesus, and then you come forward through those 30 years, all the different stories and what they've learned as well. And then that's really key, because as Ian said earlier, it is loads of good stories about time on the road, but also it's quite inspirational, and it aims to, in a really easy, unpressured way, just equip people who have faith to be able to talk about it to other people. So as you see them go through, maybe start with their early adventures on the beach in Bournemouth, and then moving through starting to go into prison, starting to go into drug rehabs, starting to hone their craft and work out how the presentations look and how much weightlifting to do and how much to involve the audience and whose story to tell when and when to give the gospel message. You see them learning how to do it, and that's inspiring in itself. And then towards the end of the book, there's some really good sort of teaching, I suppose, but it doesn't come across like that. Lots of really good tips for people who are Christian and want to explain their faith to others, how to do that confidently and naturally. So yeah, that's how we structured it, really.
I mean, when you're talking to a bunch of people, whether it's in a prison or a primary school, I mean, there's an image from a really tough prison in New York to a primary school. I mean, I've worked in primary schools. I understand how that functions. I've done loads of assemblies, and I love doing that. But it's a very different audience, and yet it's the same message. But here's the thing that I picked up from what you were saying earlier, Ian. You were talking about how you were getting into shape, bodybuilding, powerlifting, all that sort of stuff. And yet in your bid to get into shape, you got really, really badly out of shape until, it's not meant to be a deep thing, but until God came along and then kind of actually gave you something to shape yourselves against to give you real form and function.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose I lived in the darkness. The title is about that, isn't it? That we walked in darkness, both Arthur, myself, and Joe. Joe's background was different from us, except for that he was a powerlifter, but he was involved in the occult. And so where Arthur and myself, it was door work and in debt collecting and stuff like that. A lot of violence involved. Joe was more the occult, but darkness is darkness, isn't it? And we were walking that darkness until we encountered the light, and the light was Christ. He came into my life and just transformed me. I would never say it's easy being a Christian, that's for sure. But God, where I can't do it, God's Spirit gives me the strength to do it. So he encourages me, sets me free and gives me hope. And so we like to give that and part that to other people. So, for example, just this weekend, I'm in taking a chapel in a drug rehab. Then I'm driving up to Liverpool and I'm in a chapel in a prison in Liverpool on Sunday. So a lot of driving, a lot of meetings. Wide variety. Sometimes, like we said, primary schools. You couldn't get more different, could you? As you just said, being in a little private school, a primary school. There's maybe a private school in somewhere like Guernsey, And the week before, pardon me, the week before we were out, I don't know, some hardcore area on the streets, communicating some gypsy community in Romania, so the variety's been incredible, but God is able to give you the ability, the wisdom to be able to speak in all circumstances. I think for us, it's just to be able to say, here I am, use me.
I love that idea because I think I say this so many times. God, I really believe, has made us each with purpose and on purpose. So we have no pointlessness. When God takes hold of us, he took hold of you guys from your work, with a door work or debt collection. He took that, and it's all redeemable, which I absolutely adore about God. Takes who we were. Bad is still bad. Darkness is still darkness, but he redeems that in some phenomenal way. So you get to speak now to children in primary schools and say, look, this is who I am.
And the hope is that although we've had these extreme backgrounds, that through reading our stories on the road, it would encourage others that, you don't have to have had these bad backgrounds to communicate the gospel. All have fallen short of God's standards, haven't they? So to encounter a living God, to actually get your head around the fact that God is real, and he revealed himself through the person of Jesus Christ, and then to get your head that God in flesh, incarnate, dying on the cross, rising again, conquering sin, giving us eternal life. That itself is just like, how'd you get your head around all that? So to then be able to communicate that through your personal testimony or just through whatever means God has given you, whatever way he's given you, whatever opportunities he opens up to you. And I think that was our hope in this book, is to say, come on, we can do this. This is it might look daunting, but every opportunity, it's like the story of the starfish, isn't it, where the speech is full of starfish, but every one you throw back is really important. So we just hope that it inspires people to get out and get involved in communicating the gospel.
Jude, I can see you must have had so many stories and possibilities, and like you say, one of the biggest things is what do we cut out, because it's all about telling the stories, and you want the book to start, to have a middle and a finish, and it's got to move through. Have you got a favorite piece that you think, I've just got to have this in the book?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of bits that are my favorite, and I think it's because the stories are so varied. So obviously there's loads of sort of jolly anecdotes about being on the road, but there's also some really extraordinarily dramatic and sobering stories. One of which I would say would be my favourite, which is the guys going and doing their presentation at a men's event, packing up the van at the end. And quite interesting, often it's when they're packing up the van and sort of trying to leave and go home that someone will just come along and have a very brief sort of conversation, and they've got no idea, but that conversation might have changed that person's life. So there's one story where someone comes up to Arthur after a performance and says, you spoke to me 2 years ago. And Arthur's like, did I? I don't really remember. What did I say? It turns out Arthur said about 5 words to this guy. The guy went out that very night, having heard the presentation, having heard these 5 words from Arthur when Arthur was packing up the van, and changed his life around. Went to God and said, I've got to change. Will you help me? Got himself off drugs, got himself into some better friendships, got himself going to church, and came back 2 years and said to Arthur, look at me now, my life's completely changed. And stories like that are really sobering. My other favourite story, I think, is when Arthur didn't die. So there's a misunderstanding. I mean, Arthur is getting on. He's a grandpa, and
bless him.
And he's had a lot of health challenges. partly related to his previous substance abuse. And there was just a misunderstanding where someone rang up to ask somebody to tell Arthur that someone else had died, and the message suddenly went round that Arthur had died. And you know what social media is like now, and these guys, Tough Talk, are pretty well known in certain circles. So within moments, I think a lot of people around the world were mourning Arthur, and then about an hour later, Arthur discovered that he'd died. So, you know, just these little things. And I mean, it's a funny story, but I guess the reason it's so funny when you read it in the book is because you've seen these guys together. You've seen how they've met. You've seen the laughs they've had. You've seen the challenges they've had. You've seen the faith that they share. You've seen they're quite different personalities, but both engaged on this extraordinary road of telling people their story and what their God can do for people. So when you get a little kind of a funny one like that, it's brilliant, hilarious.
Back to you, Ian. You talked about the stories of 34 years of faith, of being on the road with Tough Talk, and how that's all been in some way brought into this book. I'm guessing, because I haven't seen the book yet, but blending your story, Arthur's story, I'm guessing Joe as well, but just the story of the gospel. But what's it like to read your own story? Have actually given that in prisons and schools and what have you. How is it impacting you right now to read your own story yourself?
In this particular book, I think it's what's interesting about it is you kind of just carry on doing what the Lord's asked you to do, and you don't revisit normally 30 years of story. So when we put this book together and we started to write it, it was quite funny. I think Jude already mentioned it, what to keep in, what to leave out, and when you read it again, you can see how much we've changed and developed over the years, from the first early stories we put together and then stuff that's happening later on. And I think the world around us, to be honest with you, has changed as well so much. So, when I first started in working in prison, so I do a lot of prison work in gyms, in drug wings, and in church chapels in the prisons. And back 25, 30 years ago, there was very few Muslims in prisons, almost non-existent. There was no pagan ministers. There was just Church of England chaplains. However, now it's totally different. So 2 weeks ago, I was invited into a prison by an imam. I did the service for the imam in the Church of England. Then there was a pagan minister that took me into the health wing to preach and share with the guys in the health wing. And I thought, the world's so different from what it was. So when I read the stories, you can see how the world around us has changed in the way we've evangelized, how the Lord's equipped us to get through some of these situations and to be as wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove, I suppose is the idea, isn't it? The aim for us is that people might encounter Jesus Christ.
The thing is, the gospel of Jesus doesn't change, whether it's a 4-year-old in a primary school, 5-year-old, whether it's a 40-year-old in a prison. Jesus is the same. How we might translate that into people's lives, maybe we've got different approaches. As Paul said, I'm all things to all men. And obviously you're not going to be quite the same with a 5-year-old in a primary school as you will be in a prison. And yet the message is the same, which is one of redemption. Where's Tough Talk going at the moment? I mean, you've got your book coming out. Is it just business as usual, or is this somehow inspiring? Well, what's next?
Well, I think it will be business as usual. We've never looked to sort of change the formula of what we do in some ways, although your audience is always different. So like you just said, the gospel always is the same, how you package that, how you share that. So if I'm talking on a Sunday morning in a church, this week, Sunday, I was in a Methodist church. And don't do a lot of Methodist churches nowadays, and I was probably one of about 3 men in the service, so it was mostly women. And so, I'm telling, and it's Mother's Day as well. I was like, wow, how bizarre is this? It's Mother's Day, So I'm telling a lot of mummy stories in my story, talking stories about how my story impacted my mum and what a character she was. And you have to just be able to blend your stories of your life to get to Christ crucified and share the hope of the gospel that, those who call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And we want people to come to faith and to encounter Jesus Christ. So it's kind of it has to develop. It can't. When we first started it was like, my name's Ian McDowell and I was a doorman. And it was also rigid and tough, you know. So, and then we realized actually a bit of humor, have a bit of fun, have a bit of humor. If people are less likely to dislike you if you can make them laugh. And evangelists are not really that well liked. They're not well liked outside the church. And I found it quite soon on in my Christian experience that a lot of the church don't like evangelists because it kind of pushes people to feel a bit uncomfortable. But that's part of the idea of the book, is to say, you know what, if you could get hold of this and get out, you'd be amazed what just talking to someone at the school gate about your faith, or talking to someone in the shop, or, there's personal encounters that are far more rich and rewarding than even when you're standing in a big stadium preaching to thousands of people. It's those personal encounters that you remember the most. And whether it's in the coffee shop or the barber shop, it's those stuff that really develop your faith, and you get a better understanding of your faith by sharing it. So that was the aim. That's the purpose. It has been fun writing the book, because it's taken us back over memories, and particularly when Arthur and me are together with Joe talking to Jude, I think it was harder to keep out stories and know what to put in. Really, that was, we do go on a bit.
Jude, the process of writing is always going to be different for different people. Does this feel like a slightly different project from other books you've written? Does it feel different? I mean, how's that gone for you?
Yeah, it feels both different and similar. So I guess the sort of groove that I've worn for myself in co-authoring is that I come alongside these extraordinary people with extraordinary stories. Funnily enough, all three so far of the books that I've co-authored with Authentic have been about people that I consider extraordinary, but who very much consider themselves completely ordinary people. And I just help bring their stories out. So that's exactly what I've done with Ian, Joe and Arthur. I've just helped them bring their story out using, my technical skills as a writer. But I think what's different about this one is that we didn't start with anything written. I think previous books I've started with some kind of written document. With this one, we just got on Zoom and the guys just talked and talked and talked. And then I had this mass of material. And then, of course, when you talk a story, it's quite different to when you write it down. So we had quite a lot of discussions, didn't we, Ian, about kind of turning stories that you might tell out loud in an event, turning them into a written record is quite different. And I think... I think the other just interesting thing here as well is Ian was saying how there was a lot of women at the church that he preached at recently. I think this is a really good book for men, and there's a lot of discussion at the moment. I've got 3 teenage boys. Oh, well, 3 boys, 2 of which are teenagers. And there's so many discussions at the moment, quite rightly, about what it is to be a man. And I think there's a lot of good stuff in this book about what manhood can be and what it doesn't need to be. And you've got these, in a sense, manly men who are interested in fitness and powerlifting and stuff, but they've also got this incredible faith in a loving God. And I think it's a powerful testimony, actually. And there's also personal stories in the book from specific individual men who have been touched by Tough Talks ministry, and either some of them have literally come to a Christian faith through that, some of them have been impacted in a particular way or moved on, and I think I would particularly recommend the book for reading by men who maybe feel that their perception of faith and Christianity doesn't match up to who they think they are as a bloke, sort of thing.
Perhaps a time such as this book was written. Definitely a crisis amongst male. Like what's male? What's man? What's men? What's fathers? What's sons? All those questions. They do need answering. Ian, just come back to you for 1 minute, just as we kind of wrap this up a little. So, Lifting the Darkness. It's a book about your story, about Arthur, about the journey of Tough Talk to where it is today. What would be one thing you hope that somebody could get who's reading this and thinking, do you know what, I can't do evangelism, my life is boring, I don't have the excitement of these guys, I haven't done what they've done, who would listen to me ever? What would your response be to that person?
I'm hoping that the book breaks some of those barriers and strongholds that people hold and perceive about themselves, because before a holy God, we're all created in God's image, aren't we? And we're all unique, and we all do have a story, and so we're really hoping that it will encourage people to see that if they know and they're a follower of Jesus Christ, they've got a story to tell. what Jude touched on just now about men as well, and for us it is it's you travel around and you can see that a lot of men, I had a number of conversations Sunday about my husband doesn't want to come to church, our husband doesn't want to, doesn't believe in God, and so we want to encourage men, because I think it seems to me ladies get it but men don't, and if men can see the cause of the gospel, it's an exciting thing to be out sharing your faith. All hell may break loose at times. You go through ups and downs. It can be wild, but there's something incredible. And I get, it's like I was never good at classroom and sitting in class as a kid. I wanted to be out and doing stuff, and to me that's the Christianity I came to faith in. It was out, being involved, praying for people on the streets, and doing street outreaches, and just stuff that you think, I can't do that, I don't want to do that. But I think we have a quote in the book where it's like going into the cold sea in England. You don't want to do it, but when you've done it and you've been out in that sea, and you come out, you feel so refreshed, and it's just something. It's sharing your faith does something to you. It breaks down spiritual holds. It loosens you up spiritually, and you just realize you want to worship Jesus even more. So the real encouragement is to get guys to see there's a cause out there. The gospel is worth living for, worth dying for, and hopefully it appeals to more than just men. But that's the plan anyway.
Cool. Ian and Jude, thank you for sharing about this. Where I know the release date for this is the 11th of April. Where can people go off and find this book?
So the book's published by Authentic Media. It comes out on April the 11th. On sale, it'll be on Amazon, obviously, but you can also get it at good Christian stores like Aslan and Eden, all those Christian bookshops. And I'm sure it'll be lots of links to it via Tough Talk's Facebook page and all your online resources, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. So we if you want to know anything about Tough Talk and some of the other stuff we've done and we do, you can find us on Facebook, and we do some stuff on Instagram and YouTube and that. So we'll be advertising that. But I think at the moment you can actually pre-order a copy. From Amazon. I think, as Jude said, it comes out in a few days' time. But that might be the quickest way at the moment of getting hold of the book.
Fantastic. Lifting the Darkness. Thank you kindly, both of you. This sort of stuff excites me because I absolutely believe we are all made intrinsically with purpose and on purpose. And it's great to see two very different people. Jude with the writing skills, Ian with your story, and Arthur and all the other stuff that's in there. But when God brings two people together as he does, it's amazing. It isn't just two, it's kind of, it grows. I don't know, God's maths is always going to be baffling me. It's better than school math, which makes no sense. But 2 + 2 or 1 + 1 all of a sudden becomes like 84 million or something. But that's God math. So I really hope and pray this reaches people. Jude, Ian, thank you. Lifting the Darkness out at Amazon, 11th of April, and all other good bookshops coming soon. Thank you both.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you.